morning, lads.
Good accent. And let's start it like the way they start. Hey, Ringo. And you go, hi, Georgia. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Remember, they started that way. This is our Happy New Year episode.
Oh, yeah. Happy New Year. It is.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you, too. I was going to keep going with the accent, but you shit on it so quickly, I've lost all confidence.
You gotta work on your scows. That's what they call it, eh?
Scows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm done. Welcome, everybody, to... I almost said Alex and DJ Watch a Doc.
No, it's Jump Off a Doc. It's called Jump Off a Doc.
You're
hot.
damn right it is.
I'm Alex Nussbaum.
Oh, I'm DJ Demers.
Okay.
And Happy New Year.
It is hot. I'll tell you, this wig is just already making me sweat. But these glasses, they might have to stay.
When you keep the glasses on, but without the wig, that's a whole different. That's like a Morpheus look rather than the Beatles. I'll tell you what, I'm keeping this wig on the whole time. I don't care how hot it is. I've never felt cooler in my life. I feel like a Beatle right now. Oh, and we watched
the wig on. I think if I keep the wig on, it's sort of more of a. I could do like more of an Oasis kind of thing. I think more than they've been known to sound like the Beatles, so that's about the same, right?
Of course, yeah. But so I guess we should say we watched the Beatles documentary, the new Peter Jackson 3-parter, Get Back.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And it was phenomenal. I loved. It was long. It was like 8 minutes. 8 hours. But
it went by like 8 minutes,
phenomenal.
didn't it, DJ?
It did go by like 8 minutes.
I thought it was.
Did you like
right.
it?
I thought it was all right. No, I thought there was. Look, there were elements of it that were great. They were amazing. But I mean, at some point, I mean, like
some stuff's got to end up on the chopping room floor.
Editing room, something like that. I just know that Peter Jackson did when he had 6 hours of footage to begin with, and then he was going to do like an extended cut, and they were like, Disney was like, we don't want an extended cut. He's like, all right, and then he went back and he was like, let's make it 8 hours, and so it was almost 8 hours. And I'm thinking like, okay, at least 2 hours could be cut up with that. But he wanted to tell a story. He said there was a lot more of a story. There was more of a narrative when he included the 8 hours. So, all right.
The reason I liked the 8 hours, I agree with you. It felt too long. But the reason that I liked it is the fact that it was so long made me feel like a fly on the wall. Like some parts were so long where I was like, do I really need to hear this conversation? But that was the point of it. Like hearing them talk about what they wanted for lunch for 5 minutes just showed like the process of recording an iconic album like that album still entails a lot of boredom and mundanity.
Yeah, I felt like I was one of the Beatles for sure. Because I felt like I was obliged to be at a rehearsal, and it felt like it was kind of dull, and I felt like I wish I could maybe take a break, and it did require a lot of breaks. It was I watched that in many sittings.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I watched it. I actually forgot that we said we were going to watch it. So
I know.
You were under the impression that I was going to watch it over the Christmas break, and then like 3 days ago, and you're like, so we're watching the Beatles doc, or we're talking about the Beatles doc, right? I was like, yeah. So I've just been watching it nonstop over the last 3 days, and man, oh man, those songs are stuck in my head. Let me ask you a question though before we get into the music and everything. Were you a fan of the Beatles before this documentary? Are they a large part of your genetic makeup?
I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a fan in that I think they are great musicians, and they are, those are great songs, but not like I didn't become a super fan. I never bought an album. I had a friend who was a super fan, but like for me, I was a Zeppelin. I needed to get the lead out.
I gotcha.
On Q107. Sorry, I listened to a lot of classic rock.
I didn't know you were a Zeppelin guy.
How could you?
You could tell me, I guess.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
You, this is where here we are. I'm telling you.
Okay. Zeppelin. So no Beatles, but you liked them, but you weren't like a super fan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think they are great, and watching this made me think, oh, that's interesting to watch how great artists make great art. But I also am a firm believer that great artists. Sometimes you don't want to watch them make great art. You just want to enjoy the great art.
The mystery, not seeing how the sausage is made.
Yeah, a little bit, and also A friend of mine, I have a philosopher friend, a guy who's like a professor at like Dalhousie, right? And he, I remember years ago, you told me that how like the ancient Greeks loved art. You know, they revered it, and yet they hated the artist. They thought they were just like, it was like, you know, they were in the gutter. It was like the gutter and the stars, you know. It was like they wanted no part of the artist. They wanted to remove the notion of an actual mortal being associated with this immortal thing. And yeah, which
I feel that as a stand-up comedian, don't you?
Yeah, right. You ever hang out with these people?
People are like, oh, we all need a laugh, and then the actual person giving the laugh, they're like, oh, you can make a living doing that? You're like, I thought you liked to laugh.
Is that the vibe you get from other people, where they're like,
sometimes.
Yeah, I know they're like, huh, that's a tough.
If you're
living,
not
huh?
Seinfeld, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, if you're not famous, it's like, oh, that's a tough living, huh? I'm like, sorry, you're an accountant? You're telling me this? So I'd slit my wrists.
Okay, so here's my biggest revelation that I've found from watching this movie. Because, you know, they had already made a documentary years ago with this footage. What was it? Get Back? Was that the name of the original documentary?
No, it was actually just I think it was Let It Be, like the documentary was.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. So that one focused on like, this is why the Beatles broke up. Look at how terrible it all was. Look at the acrimony. So this one, the biggest revelation was they had a lot of fun. It was amazing to watch these four lads who have been through thick and thin for years upon years, you know, the highest of the highs. And they were just goofing around, just being 28-year-old dudes having a fun time making their next album. There was some downs, you know, some negative side too, but for the most part, man, it looked like four friends making an album and having fun, which was really cool to see.
I think that's true, but it also felt like a little bit like four men who are a little tired of doing the same thing that they've been doing for so many years. I mean, half their life since they got together originally. I mean, it did feel a little, and also rehearsal and the work of it seemed kind of tough, especially when you're doing heroin the night before. Listen, I don't need to talk about John Lennon like that.
It was interesting because nobody wanted to talk about drugs on camera. Anytime somebody even alluded to it, you could tell they were like, no.
I don't know if you recall, but this is on Disney Plus. The fact that this is, I think, the first thing that they did allow swearing.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? You're telling me Bill Burr didn't swear in The Mandalorian? I never watched it. I'm just joking. I just would love to see Bill Burr dropping F-bombs in a Star Wars franchise.
You had me there. I actually believe that maybe he did. And and then I realized, wait a second, children are watching. But it is, that and also the smoking. I think they even had to. I think that in the disclaimer in the beginning, it was like a warning. There were people are smoking here. And I was like, yeah. What about the JB? They're also drinking.
True. Yeah, it's funny when you see that smoking warning, like language and smoking, and you're like, oh no. But man, this is like any old documentary we've watched, the amount of smoking people were doing. But this one was extra like in your face because you're watching people who rely on their instrument of their voice, just chain smoking all day long. You're like, is that not impeding your work at all? You're about to sing Let It Be, and you're like, hold on, let me just take a big drag off this cigar. Not even a cigarette sometimes.
I think some people like it just to make their voice sound even more gravelly, you know? I mean, you listen to like John and stuff, when they're wailing, I mean, it's got a kind of a gravelly sound to it, which is appealing, I have to say.
Oh, yeah. Whose voice do you like better? Oh, and I shouldn't even say between just Lennon and McCartney, the whole Beatles, because George sings a lot too as well. Whose voice do you gravitate to in the Beatles?
I feel like that was one of the questions I was going to ask you too. Because that's a big question: is Lennon or McCartney? There was a guy that made a short film that was just that, like over a half an hour of people answering one or the other, like celebrities and musicians and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And
Mark Maron had Peter Jackson on his podcast to talk about this documentary, and he said that same thing. He was like, I have a hard time watching McCartney just because I've always been a Lennon guy. It's so interesting how you pick a side when they're like part of the same band.
Pretty much, and also, I think they're both good. I mean, they're both good at what they do. I think it really is just a question of whether you like a sound better than another sound. I mean, McCartney is a bit sort of sweeter in a certain sense. But I mean, I think Harrison, he's the guy with soul, right? He's got soul.
He does, yeah. Well, yeah, because he spent the most time with the Maharishi in India. I love that one part where Ringo was waiting when George quit the band and he was just alone. I think he was alone with the director, and they got these flowers from the Maharishi, and then the director was like, "So do you like India?" And Ringo was like, "No, not really."
I know, and I get it. I mean, sometimes you don't like India. Sometimes you don't fall in with what the crowd wants, kind of thing. I mean, because that's the thing is they were all going through some phase in their life. But I mean, I want to because I feel like we're kind of just chitty chatting. But I thought maybe I'd throw a little something at you. Here's one. You ever play an instrument?
Yeah, I play guitar. Actually, watching this documentary made me want to pick up the guitar again. I was strumming while I was watching it.
Yeah.
I'm just a 3-chord, not a very good guitar player.
When did you start playing?
Later, when I was like 16, maybe.
Oh, so yeah. Okay, so but still though, like a little. But did you ever think that you were going to start a band?
I would jam all the time. Me and my buddies would play in his basement all the time. So we did play songs, but I never had any illusions that I was good enough to start a band. Oh, really? No, I mean, I wear hearing aids. I can't lie to myself.
I guess I sort of skipped over that particular fact.
It would be a very inspiring story if I did, but no, never had any illusions.
Exactly. You might even make it on America's Got Talent with a story like that.
That would be a genuine story I could get behind instead of the force-fed bullshit they had me. Can you believe this man can't hear, but he talks?
That's insulting, isn't it? That was an insult to the whole community.
It's true. Why, did you start a band? I get the feeling Alex Nussbaum was in a band when he was young.
No, I wasn't that cool. That's what makes me a comedian, because I wasn't that cool.
Okay.
I did play piano like a good Jewish boy. When I was a kid, up until I hit 13. Pretty much when I became a man is when I stopped playing piano, because it was all classical and I got bored of it by that time. I didn't even think the idea of transitioning and maybe learning a little bit of rock and roll with the piano. I just was like, I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to go to lessons anymore. And then I bought a piano, and I still consider eventually starting to play it again. Just haven't yet, but I plan it.
Yeah, the plan is the most important part, as long as you got the plan.
That's definitely what they say in all the books.
Well, you should listen to Paul McCartney, and what he said was, what you need is a serious program or work, not an aimless rambling amongst the canyons of your mind. That stuck with me as a comedian and potentially as a wannabe piano player. Not wannabe, erstwhile, I should say. I don't know, at least a less offensive word for wannabe, but I really dug that. I'm talking like I'm in the documentary.
The hair is seeping into your head.
It really is. Yeah, like the Mad Hatter. There's mercury in this wig. But I really like that, because you just think about this artistry and you think about the drugs, especially in their later era and all that. But like, no, he was the kind of daddy figure that he said the band needed. But he was the guy making sure they weren't just rambling through the canyons of their mind. He was like, we need to work at this or it's not going to get made.
Right.
And it's the same way with like, even, I'm trying to put together a comedy special right now. I'm like, how come that joke won't how come that ending's not good yet? I don't have the punch yet. It's like, because you haven't sat down and worked on it, you idiot. Like, nothing gets done if you don't do it. Well, which is another reason I loved this documentary. They just were working. Punch it in.
Well, Paul seemed like he was the cracking the whip more, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I think he wanted it more, too. I think everybody else was kind of starting to feel like they wanted to just do their own thing. I think he was,
Except for Ringo. I got to say, Ringo was the MVP of this movie. Maybe Billy Preston, too, coming in and just killing it on the piano. Yeah. He was a revelation to watch, man. Billy Preston.
I thought that was the best part of the movie. And you know what? That actually, I timed it. That came in at the midpoint, right in the middle of the second episode, because it was a turning point. Because it was like it was kind of a drag up to that point, and then suddenly it was like he made them. Plus, not only was he adding his own little funky thing to the equation, but you felt like they were now showing off what they had done to him and seeing what he came up with based on what they had done. So it was there was like a payoff for them after up to then rehearsing, and even John had to point out that it was like now that Billy's here, I mean it's now they got something.
For sure. That's another reason I kind of liked how long this dragged on, because when they were getting so bored of being in Twickenham, the original studio they were in, I was so bored of it. So I actually felt that relief when they moved over to Apple Studios, and then when Billy came aboard, like I felt the same relief as them, and I think I wouldn't have felt that if it was only 10 minutes rather than fucking 4 hours. But Ringo was the MVP for me, man. That dude was a breath of fresh air. Even just hearing Linda, Paul McCartney's girlfriend at the time, like saying, I really like Ringo, his energy, and like he was just, or like when Paul and Linda were holding hands at the very end of the movie, and then you just see Ringo with his red jacket, his hand come and hold their hand as well. Like he just seemed like the positive. George was really kind of moody, spiritual, whatever you want to call it. John Lennon was like the class clown. Paul McCartney was like, keeping everybody in line, but still having fun, but the kind of ringleader. And then Ringo was the guy who's the guy you want in your group, where he's just like, yeah, I'm down for whatever. Yeah,
he has, I think he probably had the best kind of like good heart of all of them. I feel like the way they treated George when he left, I felt like, well, I kind of get it, because, they weren't really accepting his ideas as much, like Paul wasn't. And then John, like, pats him on the head saying, after he came in with the I Me Mine or whatever the song, and there was like a waltzy tune, and he pats him on the head to say, this is a rock and roll band. And then they start mockingly waltzing to it, him and Yoko. And I thought, man, I mean, at one point it's like, I don't fucking need this from you guys. Get the fuck out of here.
I didn't take that as mocking when him and Yoko were dancing to I Me Mine. I thought they were saying they liked it. I totally construed it differently.
I mean, I would have thought that if I didn't see him beforehand, pat him on the head and say, this is a rock and roll band.
Okay. Yeah, there were so many moments, even like when they were talking about India, and George was like, because they said they weren't being themselves in India, and then George was like, the idea of being yourself is ridiculous, because then we wouldn't be ourselves right now. I forget how he explained it.
Yeah, he said something, if you were yourself, you wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, because he's pretty much saying that being ourselves doesn't require this. It doesn't require us to push ourselves to do this in the grand scheme of things. This is a guy who is trying to understand the art of dying. I mean, this is beyond like, some rock and roll tunes. So yeah, I get it. All right, here's something, because you mentioned you're working on your next special. Right, so you're in a situation. I realized they said one of the things they said was they haven't released a single in 5 months. Remember they said that? I'm asking you. So here's a two-parter. What was the last bit that you put out as a single? You have a joke that you put out as a single, and have you thought of recording your next special, particularly during COVID, on the roof?
Wow. First answer, I actually did a recording for Just for Laughs at Dynasty Typewriter in LA last summer, and they released it a few months ago. So like 2 singles, like 3 months ago.
2 singles. Oh, look at you. I was sort of joking, but look at you, huh? Under a different label. Interesting.
Yeah, but it was for a COVID distanced audience, and I don't like how it turned out. So,
right.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can find it, I think, somewhere on Spotify, but I wouldn't say it's my finest work, But, it's a distant audience, so I can always blame it on that. So COVID's been really good for the ego in that way. But
they should have sweetened it, don't you think? Put a little audience in there. We don't have to know.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know why they didn't. Maybe they did. Maybe I was worse than I thought. But... the rooftop, I would love to do an outdoor show, and I saw comedian Sam Morrill did that during the pandemic. He released a special of him doing, and I didn't finish watching it, but it was a cool concept. But I'm glad you brought that up, because that rooftop idea was terrible. Like it's always been, everybody knows when the Beatles got up on the rooftop in London and played, but when I watched it here, I'm like, you can't see them. They're so high up. Everybody on the street is like, that's the Beatles, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like,
what is that? Where's that coming from? Yeah.
I would have loved to see that idea of them on the boat going all the way over to Libya, Nobody wanted to do it, and I see why. I forget the name of the Sabratha they wanted to go to. They wanted to go to. They kept calling it in Arabia, but I think it was near Tripoli. But in any event, in the Middle East, or even just on the boat, they had that idea, and then they were like, "But then we'd be stuck on this boat for 2 weeks with all the people." And as a man who used to do cruise ship comedy, let me tell you, they were right to not want to do that. It's brutal, But would have been way more interesting than that rooftop thing. Like, the best thing that happened to that rooftop performance was the policemen coming up, because if they hadn't come up, that is just a pretty nondescript performance.
Well, yeah, pretty much. Also because how do you end it? And then when you end it, maybe there's a little bit of applause from a few people, but you don't really get a sense of like a big. At least that you get pulled by the cops makes it seem like it's very rock and roll. You could see how happy Paul was when the cops showed up. Like, yeah, that's right, we are rock and roll. I might be close to closing in on 30, but I'm still rock and roll. And also, I one of the other things I didn't like about the rooftop idea was that it's like, let's play a concert, but it's not really a concert, it's a recording, because they kept repeating the songs. I mean, I'm sure at first even the people who were into it down on the street, they're like, oh cool, and then like, wait a second, isn't that same song again? Yeah. But it wasn't, whose idea? It was actually the idea of the documentary filmmaker, the Michael Lindsay Hogg, I think his name is, the guy who got the original footage. Yeah, he was the one who was like, why don't you go on the roof? And it sounds... I
think he was just trying to get him to do something.
Something, that's it. And it sounds cool until you actually look at how high the roof is and how it's completely not visible from the street. Then I was like, oh, because I always had this image of oh yeah, that's that thing that that U2 had copied. Do you know about that? Do you remember that? Do you ever see that? U2 did that. Yeah. They got on a roof and like people, and they had the same thing where like people were just like, hey, wait a second, what's that? And it's U2. Ooh, it's really cool. But that roof was like maybe 3 stories high, so people could actually see. I don't know, because I actually didn't do the follow-up research before this podcast to find out. We can look at it right now. If you want to look at it right now?
Nah, it's fine. Hey, look it up if you guys are fans of U2. Oh, you can look it up if you want. You know what? Look it up, Alex. I really want to know now, please.
Nah, you know what? You ruined it.
I should have just said, yeah, we should look it up, Alex. That's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's called yes and. But you know what? You're a stand-up, not an improviser. That's all right.
Mine, it's always yes and, except no U2.
No U2. Yes and.
The funny thing about that rooftop concert was that the cops finally come up on the roof. They were the most patient, ineffectual policemen I've ever seen in my life.
They were getting the runaround, and they were like 19 years old, I discovered.
The cops were at that time?
Yeah, they were kids, and they were getting the runaround from them, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, and they were probably Beatles fans, if we're being honest, if they were that young.
I know, they kind of wanted, they didn't want to be, and that they're probably self-conscious about like, oh no, are we going to be the cops that took down the Beatles from their concert?
Yeah. And the funniest part was when they finally come up on the roof, all the Beatles are kind of pushed to the front a little bit. So they're like, it's a bit of distance that they would have to cover to get to them. But the only person who's within like arm's reach of them when they first come through is the only black man on the roof, Billy Preston. So obviously we know that there's been a lot of issues with race and police. I don't know the history of race and policing in Britain as well.
Think of that. Wow. Okay.
But yeah, he's probably like, the cops are right behind him. He's probably like, hey guys, you got my back, right? Like, because he's the closest one to apprehend if they wanted to. So I couldn't help but notice that. Just like, totally. Damn, he's in the worst position of all of them, and he's not a Beatle.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. It wasn't even his idea. By the way, I forgot to mention, I also discovered that they are releasing, I don't know if that's the word, but they're going to be, what's the word I'm looking like? Releasing in theaters, I guess, the concert footage as a IMAX film.
Really?
This month. In fact, I feel almost like we're doing the service of promoting this. January 30th is the date that it's on IMAX. I actually looked it up. It's happening right over at the Chinese Theater, Man's Chinese Theater. It's at the Universal City Walk over here, and they're and so I'm thinking. So I saw that and I thought, oh, look at that IMAX. That's kind of cool. Well, first of all, I was thinking IMAX. What was that, like 3 stories of like 16 millimeter footage that's been. I mean, it's nicer than it was, but still, I don't know how it's going to hold up on an IMAX screen, first of all. And second of all, like I said, people are just going to be watching like 4 takes of the same song over, like, that's...
It's going to be the edited version, though, right? You're not going to be watching all these takes?
I don't know, but it's an hour and a half. They weren't up there for that long. I think it's an hour and a half. I could be wrong. I think it's like... I mean, I think it's as long... I think it was 50 minutes, 50, in the doc. And so, I mean, you know, if you're going to go all the way to IMAX, it's going to be at least that much.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I do love the Beatles. I really do. But that rooftop concert, like some of those songs, I don't... Because they didn't play the slower one because they're trying to rock on the roof, right? So they're not even playing Let It Be.
That's right.
They're not playing... what's another slow, amazing one off that? Anyway, I don't love that 909 song.
No, it wasn't great.
Yeah, so there were a few songs they're playing up there. I'm like, man, I wish they were playing... Because there's songs by them I love, like from their catalog.
Certainly hearing JoJo,
JoJo was a man who thought he was a woman. That is etched into my brain now. But they sang that so much.
Yeah, you think so? And the fact that I heard it 3 more times on the roof.
I know.
I was like, okay, all right, I get it. I understand. I get it about JoJo. All right already, Paul. Stop with the JoJo, I say to him. Anyway,
get back, Loretta. Get back to where you once belonged. Your mama's mad at you. She's waiting for you.
Yeah, okay, Paul. Get back to where you once belonged, because I had enough of this song. I mean, I felt like I was like, you know, you ever work in a place and then they they play the same music over and over again. That's how I felt.
Oh my God!
And you can't.
Absolute
and you're like,
comedy.
I gotta go back to work again. And it was 8 hours, so it did feel like I was at work.
That's true. Absolute Comedy in Canada. They have 3 different clubs: Toronto, Ottawa, and Kingston, and they play "Lose Yourself" by Eminem before every show.
Sure.
And they have since I started there 12
Certainly.
years ago.
In
so
fact,
I was just there doing shows.
Yeah, when I hear that song in regular life, I start to feel anxious, like I'm about to go up.
Same. I know. Second you hear Mom Spaghetti, you're like, oh God, the show's about to start. But yeah, I was just there in December. I'm like, I can't believe you guys still haven't updated this song. Like, I heard a rumor, I don't know if it's true, but one employee tried to play a different song before a show and he got fired. I don't know if that's true. It could just be
funny
legend. But
what a pathetic myth to be surrounding it.
You know why I got fired?
I was listening to Peter Jackson being interviewed, and he brought out an interesting point, because he is like a super fan. He has listened to bootlegs, and he's heard a lot of this, you know, prior to this. He knows about all the... And so they were talking about how the audio of this painted a completely different picture than the video. And so like audio alone doesn't tell you everything. Video alone, I mean, you're not going to get much of anything. But for example, they thought it was like everything sounded so much more dour, like they weren't really having a good time. But then when you saw the video put together, you know, when it was actually matched up with the audio, that all of a sudden it told a different story. It wasn't that, you know, all the historically how people envisioned this moment in time is the thing that led to their breakup. You don't really see it, like you even described it, like they looked like they were a bunch of guys who knew each other forever, getting together and jamming and having a good time. That whole aspect of it was lost in the audio tapes that everybody was aware of.
Probably that dry British wit too. Even when they're joking, there's not
true.
not like a big uproarious kind of laugh. It's more understated.
That is true.
Oh man, I loved when they were singing, 2 of us, but they both had their jaws clenched and weren't opening their mouths. Paul and John just looking at each other, just 2 of us going no. They were just buddies, man. Those guys played since they were 14 years old, played 8 hours a day in Hamburg, Germany. Mm-hmm. Like, those guys had been through a lot. They should have started playing Jaws music when they first started talking about Alan Klein, the manager who came in, and essentially they were just alluding to like John like having the meeting with him and everything. But like anybody who knows the Beatles knows that was kind of the beginning of the end, probably more than Yoko Ono, which has kind of been overblown a little bit. But Alan Klein, you know, ended up taking him over. Paul McCartney didn't want to go along with him, so 3 of the Beatles said they wanted to go with him, and Paul didn't. So I think that's why they broke up. Yeah. Any of the big Beatles heads out there might correct me.
I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that, actually. I mean, I don't know that much about the history of the Beatles. So I mean, all I know is about Yoko. That myth of Yoko, you know, being the archetypal girlfriend who breaks up the band kind of thing, and then you know you watch this and you realize she's just sitting there. I mean, if this was today, she'd be scrolling through Instagram. She was just like, there was nothing for her to do. She was just sitting there. She wasn't in the way. I mean, maybe some people say, what does she need to be here for? But then I realized, like, from John's point of view, he was probably feeling a little bored by the Beatles and kind of maybe felt like there was a little bit of, maybe there was a bit of animosity between him and Paul, and just to have someone there that you can always turn to and have a little chat with, to let, to make it a more enjoyable experience. And she was just being supportive by being there, bored out of her wits.
The love that she looked at him with when she would look into his eyes or just watch him talk, you're like, damn, that's intense.
Yeah.
If you're not Beatled out, there's another documentary I watched last year about their time together before he passed away, Lennon and Yoko. I think it might be called John Lennon. It came out in the last year. Amazing documentary, and it's only like an hour and a half or 2 hours. If you want more of the Beatles,
yeah.
Let me ask you
I don't know.
this.
I'm gonna might want to take a little break until I get back to that and get back.
I know.
Anyway,
I didn't even notice.
Yeah,
Something in the way you come up with your jokes.
Please help.
Baby, you can drive my car.
And that'll be enough from the two of us. Thank you for tuning in.
Oh my goodness. There's no song there. Maybe they have a song called Oh My Goodness. Why did Peter Sellers leave so quickly?
I feel like he didn't know why he was there in the first place.
It's a weird scene.
I mean, it was like you kind of hang out. It's like an opportunity to hang out with the Beatles, but then when you're there, again, this is how I felt. I mean, I sat in, I'm like, cool, the Beatles. Okay, so that's just right. I've heard that song again. Okay, and then Billy Preston, though, he was smart to pop in because it was a case of it pays to hang, right? Sometimes when you hang out, like you've felt in, when you hang out, suddenly you're like, oh, they meet the person and they're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to maybe give you a little work. Oh, you know what, I'm glad I hung out tonight.
I'm going to say a story very quickly on my greatest example of that. When Norm Macdonald was performing at the Irvine Improv last year, I went to watch him on the Thursday night. And then the club knows me because I perform there. They let me imagine I watch him. And then the host had to back out from hosting the rest of the weekend. So I was front of mind for the club. They emailed me that night and said, hey, our host has to back out. You want to host the rest of the weekend? So I got to hang out with Norm all weekend just from going to hang the first night. Rest in peace.
Look at that.
Yeah. So hanging. Yeah, Billy Preston. And then you got to bring the goods, obviously. I like to believe I was Billy Preston there.
I like to think so, too. The chain smoking and whatnot.
Here, let me tell you my Peter Sellers theory. I think they probably did a lot of drugs together. And then when they got there, like not there, but like I think they had probably partied together. And then when he got there, they were like, oh, we're not doing drugs in front of the camera. And he was like, oh, well, see you later, guys.
That's pretty funny, yeah. And then you realize, yeah, you guys aren't that fun to hang out with when you're not stoned.
Yeah. Call me when the cameras are off.
That's an interesting theory, but yeah, that is a good question. I think you're starting a segment. Did you know? Did you know? Ready? Okay, good. That before this, I read this before Michael Lindsay Hogg started shooting the documentary Let It Be, which is the documentary. John Lennon showed him and the rest of the Beatles audio taken from one of his and Yoko's live lovemaking sessions.
Wow. I picture her wailing, just like her screaming, like when she does her songs,
Yeah, because she is a good wailer, that's for sure. But I'm wondering, maybe that broke the ice a little bit. Maybe we should both bring.
So he showed it to Michael Lindsay Hogg like he wanted it in the movie, or
I
just
think
as
it was
a
like
fun
he saw it as his way of saying, "This is us." This is separate from you and the Beatles, and this is like, I don't know if it was like kind of like an act of saying. I can't remember how he put it. He called it his calling card. I don't know how that made sense, but something about I think it just kind of like asserting their relationship by saying, "This is us. This is what we sound like when we're doing it." Artists, that's why you don't really want to meet them.
Here's another fun little fact that has to do with boning. You know how George Harrison loved Eric Clapton? He was always like bringing him up and how he's such a great guitarist and everything. Well, I read Patty Harrison's book a long time ago, like 10 or 15 years ago, because she was with George Harrison and Clapton stole her from George Harrison.
Right.
And then Harrison stole her back.
Yes. Isn't there a song based on that?
Probably.
Like
Norwegian Wood?
no, is it?
No.
Isn't it
Norwegian
like
Wood is about
no,
choosing,
but I said
I
like
think.
isn't like Layla or something like that about like somebody who went back and forth? Wasn't Layla that one? You got me on my
Maybe.
knees.
All right, what are we watching next week?
We're seeing a little thing called The Rescue.
The Rescue.
Yeah, it's about
Okay.
those. It's about those Peruvian. Sorry, Thai boy. What the hell? Not the Peruvian. Thai boys and their soccer coach that got trapped deep inside the flooded cave.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
I
it's funny.
can't
I'm
wait.
telling
I had
I'm
no
telling
idea
DJ for the first time, so you're actually getting a real response.
That's awesome. And the big reveal is when they finally go down into the cave and they find them. The whole team is just singing, Jojo was a man who thought he was a woman.
We're really
That's
glad
what
that
they're
you were
singing.
able to tune in for this particular protracted episode.
I thought you
of-
were a yes and guy.
I am. I'm saying yes, and it's time to go.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed watching the Beatles for 8 hours with us.
Whether you enjoyed it or not is irrelevant. We want you to enjoy us. And tune in again to Jump Off a Dock.
There you go. Jump off a dock. I'm DJ.
And I'm Alex. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Georgia was a guy, and he also was a woman. It depends.